A wave of eye-opening details has shaken morning commuters and late-night snackers alike, sparking fresh questions about some of the world's most iconic fast food offerings. Recent disclosures, coupled with longtime employee confessions, are stirring up more than the usual swirl of fries and patties. The focus is now squarely on a certain globally recognized chain that has dominated the burger landscape for decades, selling millions of meals every day. If you've ever stepped up to the counter or inched through the drive-thru, chances are you assumed the meat in each sandwich was at least a straightforward proposition. Now, those assumptions are under scrutiny. The immediate sensation stems from a surprising premise: the truth behind how various meaty menu items are assembled, processed, and left to linger. Certain revelations paint a vivid, unappetizing picture of pressed pork shapes, refried nuggets, and fresh fish fillets that often wait hours for a customer. These are the allegations swirling around, with the impetus often coming from ex-employees who shed light on behind-the-scenes procedures. Although corporate statements maintain that everything meets safety standards, the wave of claims suggests that what's in that burger or crispy chicken might not match your mental image of farm-fresh ingredients. Customer expectations have always been high. Large posters and commercials promise mouth-watering scenes, gleaming buns, melted cheese draping sizzling meat, and crisp toppings that appear to have come straight from the produce aisle. Yet the staffers behind the counter report something else entirely: frozen blocks that get microwaved to mask dryness, or processed chicken pressed into uniform patties bearing questionable texture. The breakfast shift, the lunch rush, and even off hours each hold their own secrets, from sausage that sits for hours under warming lights to fish that's rarely ordered and seldom replaced. And if you've ever wondered why some items come and go from the menu, especially a certain barbecue-slathered novelty, the answer seems to involve price fluctuations and the cost of raw materials, rather than purely nostalgic hype. One particularly polarizing topic concerns the tangy sandwich, known for vanishing and reappearing like a strange meteorological event, that boneless pork concoction shaped to resemble actual ribs. The official line is that it's a beloved limited-time item, stoking mania whenever it returns. Critics, however, say the product resurfaces only when pork prices plunge, maximizing the chain's profit. The rib shape is apparently just an aesthetic flourish, with the actual substance coming from ground shoulder and other trimmings. Experts note that earlier versions even contained an ingredient used in yoga mats, casting an unflattering light on the chain's broader ingredient strategy. Although that specific chemical was subsequently dropped, the sandwich continues to feature a sauce so thick and sweet it conveniently obscures the real taste of the pressed meat. Dima Fomenko, 15/4/2025, 1711, The Grill Marks. On such items are often created not by an actual grill, but by caramels, dyes, or other coloring agents that simulate a just-off-the-barbecue look. As a result, the interior can be less slow-smoked ribs and more aggregated pork bits. Industry analysts acknowledge this might be standard practice for many fast food kitchens, but it remains jarring for consumers who recall the marketing emphasis on flavor authenticity. Adding to the concerns is the extensive time these patties can spend in warming trays. A staffer might cook up a batch well ahead of the lunchtime crowd, letting them sit until an order is placed hours later. Critics label the practice an indefinite waiting game that no one sees from the customer side, yet the system is designed to keep pace with heavy traffic. Shifting from pork to poultry, attention turns to the bite-sized chicken items that have formed a staple of the chain's menu for decades. Known worldwide for their addictive flavor, these pieces have evolved through multiple recipe changes, at times described in media coverage as pink slime. Corporate spokespeople have repeatedly insisted that they no longer use any questionable slime technique, But insider testimony suggests there's still a mixture of parts beyond just premium breast meat, fat, connective tissues, and other scraps to reach the desired texture and cost point. Their breaded exterior conceals an array of chemicals and additives meant to preserve the crunchy texture, lock in moisture, and standardize the taste across thousands of locations. Meanwhile, employees mention that during peak times, huge quantities get cooked in anticipation of a surge, leaving leftover portions out. If they remain unsold for too long, management might refry or reheat them, a practice that can repeat multiple times before the product is deemed no longer servable. The net effect is a piece of poultry that's been dunked in oil repeatedly, potentially overshadowing the original notes of chicken with an older, over-fried flavor. A widely recounted scenario involves staff discovering a tray of these bite-sized chicken pieces from the previous shift, still technically within time, so they simply dunk it again to bring it to the correct serving temperature. Official corporate policy might say otherwise, but employees affirm that cost pressures, busy lines, and understaffed kitchens lead to these improvised approaches. For consumers who hold a nostalgic affection for them, it can be a sobering realization that the item is less about premium chicken morsels and more about uniform shape, taste, and shelf stability. From there, the story wades into the maritime domain with a fish sandwich that loyal fans swear by. Historically introduced to appeal to certain demographics, particularly those avoiding meat on select days, this item never reached the same sales popularity as burgers. As a result, employees allege it's often pre-made, well before it's likely to be ordered, sometimes languishing under heat lamps, until the next hungry customer requests it. Because the turnover is so low, it risks sitting for a substantially longer duration than corporate guidelines recommend. Some managers push staff to avoid waste by extending that hold time far beyond recommended windows. If it's still sitting, after multiple hours, they reheat it or bury it in extra tartar sauce to conceal the dryness. The half slice of cheese that's standard on the sandwich raises further questions. Officially, the brand claims it's a precise flavor ratio, but staff suspect a cost-saving measure that adds up to millions in reduced cheese usage over the chain's global scale. Dima Fomenko, 1504-25-17-11. Former employees also discuss oil cross-contamination. The fish is meant to be prepared separately from chicken or fries, but in busier restaurants, there may be a single bank of fryers for multiple items. The result is a fish patty picking up the residue of whatever else was fried that day and imparting a subtle fish note to other menu items. According to corporate, each store must follow protocols that keep fish fryers distinct, but staff note that reality is often messy. If you happen to order that sandwich during off hours, you might be receiving a piece that's been held far past its prime in an environment designed for volume and speed rather than culinary refinement. For health-conscious consumers, the chain's grilled chicken can appear as a safe, if not superior, choice. But behind that label of grilled lurks a process that might surprise even the most jaded. The product is described by some sources as containing around 70% actual chicken, the rest being fillers, such as modified starches and flavor enhancers. The distinctive char lines are often artificially imprinted or dyed, a practice used by multiple fast food and convenience brands, but seldom highlighted in marketing. Those who handle the product in the kitchen mention a distinctive smell that emerges from the marinade and the chemicals used to retain moisture. Because the chain wants these grilled fillets to stay presentable through multiple reheats, the marinade includes preservatives and sodium-laden solutions that keep the meat spongy rather than drying out. This approach extends the fillet's fresh appearance but can mask the expected natural texture of grilled chicken. Consumers might notice a rubbery bite or an artificially consistent shape that doesn't match at-home grilled breasts. Another quirk is that the chain's grilled chicken may not always be cooked to order in contrast with some marketing claims. During heavier business times, employees quickly sear multiple fillets, then store them in warming drawers for later assembly. By the time a customer picks the sandwich from the menu board, the chicken might already be waiting. If the interval extends too long, staff may place the piece back on the press for a quick heat-up, further altering texture and flavor. Critics note that while it remains healthier than a deep-fried product, the end result is more a compromise born of mass production than a fresh grilled item. Breakfast items, revered by many as a critical part of this chain's heritage, bring their own controversies. One glaring example is the sausage patty, described by some employees as the longest-sitting product because of early morning cooking in large batches. Under official guidelines, the hold time for cooked sausage is set at around 20 minutes, but it's reportedly common practice to keep them out for much longer. Some employees allege over an hour or even close to 2 hours as the morning rush ebbs and flows. The sausage itself houses a labyrinth of preservatives, including BHT and BHA, which remain under scrutiny from scientists in various parts of the world. In a chain that must serve customers around the clock, operators emphasize shelf-stable items, and these patties appear to exemplify that. Still, the repeated complaint from staffers is dryness. When they notice the patty getting tough, they might use a method known as steaming, placing a wet paper towel atop the product and microwaving it briefly to restore softness. That technique effectively recycles old patties back into something seemingly edible, though the result might taste far from freshly cooked. Dima Fomenko, 15-4-2025, 17 Guadalajara. Another point of alarm is that the heavy grease from these sausage patties accumulates on the grill, cross-contaminating anything else that touches it, including eggs. Although a quick scrape between uses is the standard, workers say it doesn't fully sanitize the surface, letting residual oil and bits of the patty mingle with the next item. Despite corporate attempts to implement rigorous cleaning cycles, the rapid pace in the morning means limited staff time for thorough wiping, especially during peak hours. No conversation about these meaty controversies would be complete without examining the chain's high-volume staple, the classic hamburger or cheeseburger. At certain locations, the relatively new quarter-pound iteration is cooked more or less on the spot, yet the long-standing standard patty can be another story entirely. Because those patties are exceptionally thin, cooking them is fast, but so is the cooling process. Many restaurants plan for busy phases by pre-cooking numerous patties, storing them in warming trays and hoping they get ordered soon. Employees mention that storing these cooked patties for up to 3/4 of an hour or more is not unusual, well above the official policy of 10 minutes. Once dryness or darkening sets in, staff might nuke them quickly in a microwave with a wet paper towel, aiming to salvage the patty's moisture. The difference in flavor might be subtle when smothered in ketchup, mustard, pickles, and onions, but the underlying dryness or stale edge can still come through. Observers remark that the quick add-on of sauce and toppings is the final camouflage that helps slip it past the customer's notice. An interesting side effect is that these trays get stacked with new patties over older ones, a pattern employees sometimes call double batching, so an unlucky portion might remain at the bottom, being repeatedly overshadowed by fresher batches. By the time staff realize it's still there, it could be well past any safe or recommended hold time. The chain's mass scale means no single location can represent the entire system, but the stories pop up across multiple regions, suggesting such practices are widespread. Then there's the lesser-known breaded chicken patty used in standard chicken sandwiches. Some staffers have called it the lowest rung of the chain's poultry offerings, with a reported mix of barely half actual chicken and half assorted fillers or binders. Dissecting the patty, testers find a spongy uniformity that reveals Heavy processing, including mechanical tenderization, that effectively breaks down any recognizable muscle structure. These are typically shaped, frozen, and shipped in large quantities to restaurants, where employees simply drop them in hot oil or place them in warming drawers after cooking. Because the chain can't use the same marinade or texturizing approach. For all items, it modifies the breading and seasoning to create the illusion of variety. The spicy version is essentially the regular patty dusted with a post-cook flavoring. The difficulty arises when that flavoring powder distributes unevenly, so the first few might be extra spicy, while subsequent patties hardly have any heat. In some stores, staff have admitted to adding an extra sprinkling of the seasoning for certain customers who specifically request more kick. But consistency is hardly guaranteed, though officially each patty can remain in a warming drawer for up to 30 minutes. Staff describes scenarios of an hour or more, especially in slower times. Once dryness sets in, the fallback approach is the same as with other items. Additional condiments, namely mayonnaise. This can lead to sandwiches where the ratio of sauce to chicken is remarkably high, presumably in the hope of smoothing out any odd texture or dryness. And if a certain batch is deemed unsellable for lunch or dinner, employees might dice it up to use in breakfast burritos, effectively reassigning older chicken to a new role. Critics call this a glaring example of how cost-saving overshadows standards for freshness. Dima Fomenko, 15/4, 2025, 1711. Amid all these concerns, a theme emerges: the chain's efficiency model, meant to handle high volumes and rapid service, often conflicts with the ideal of freshly cooked, high-quality ingredients. Long warming times, repeated refrying, or quick microwaving become normal coping mechanisms for busy staff, juggling lines of impatient customers. Although official documents call for frequent discards of old product, the push to control costs and avoid waste seems to override those guidelines in practice, leading to questionable turnover times for various meats. Compounding the issue are the differences between premium lines, like quarter-pound patties cooked on demand, and standardy items which rely on different hold times, different quality standards, and even different supply sourcing. Moreover, the chain scale means that meat is sourced from multiple suppliers, potentially mixing parts from many animals into a single patty. While everything might remain within safety requirements, the romance of the farm-fresh image is tested by the reality of multi-supplier aggregation, filler-laden recipes, and repeated chemical or marinade steps. Not everyone is bothered. Millions of diners pass through daily, scarfing down these products without hesitation. The brand's marketing machine ensures that the golden arches evoke a sense of familiarity, nostalgia, and convenience. But for those who begin to examine the finer details of how each item is prepared, the question arises: is the comfort of a fast, cheap meal worth the knowledge that the items might be heavily processed, reheated, or made from bits of leftover parts? Even staffers themselves often confess they avoid certain menu items. That is a message that resonates far beyond the drive-thru. An overarching corporate perspective might say that these processes have been refined over decades to keep costs manageable and ensure safe, standardized meals across the chain's global footprint. It's a monumental task feeding millions each day. But cracks appear in the form of repeated ex-employee disclosures, unorthodox hold times, multi-step revivals for dried-out items, and creative rebranding of subpar pieces for subsequent meals. Each story reduces the mystique of a brand that positions itself as a friendly, reliable pit stop in a world that's always on the go. Meanwhile, the chain has tried to modernize certain branches by introducing kiosk orders, sleek interior designs, or updated burger lines that promise fresh, never frozen meat. Yet these updates tend to apply only to select items or certain high-traffic locations. The majority of offerings remain in the domain of mass production, reliant on large, pre-cooked batches. As a result, customers looking for the safest bet might fixate on the items specifically touted as fresh or cooked to order, or perhaps they might watch carefully during off-peak hours to see if staffers are pulling patties directly from a tray that's obviously been around too long. In any case, the revelations keep circulating, fueling debates online about what's lurking behind the iconic signage. Some cynics argue that the real surprise is not that so many of these items are highly processed, but that anyone expected differently from a massive, global fast food chain. Others lament that they once felt good about picking a grilled chicken or fish sandwich to be healthier, only to find out those options might be even less appealing when the entire process is laid bare. From time to time, viral videos pop up showing a hamburger that sat on a shelf for days or a nugget that never seems to mold. These become internet sensations, fueling claims about unreal foods packed with preservatives. Corporate spokespeople typically respond by explaining that moisture content is too low for mold, or that the product meets all health regulations, yet the public conversation rarely quiets. Each new wave of photos or confessions from behind, the counter spawns fresh calls for transparency about cooking times, ingredients, and hold practices. Dima Fomenko, 15-4-2025, 1711. Beyond the gastronomic angle, some reflect on worker conditions. The pressure to meet cost targets can hamper an employee's ability to follow discard protocols or thoroughly sanitize surfaces. This environment fosters the creative solutions staff have described, from dunking stale items in oil again, to microwaving them under a damp paper towel, to repurposing them for a different time of day. Meanwhile, the chain's training materials presumably lay out best practices, but the real world merges speed, labor constraints, and managerial oversight to produce a different routine. What emerges is a system that churns out massive quantities of cheap burgers, breaded poultry, and other items at breakneck speed. For many, that's exactly what they expect from a fast food behemoth, quick, filling, and reliably the same, no matter which highway exit you choose. For others, the knowledge of how these items spend their final minutes or hours before landing in the bag can be off-putting. And if someone was already skittish about industrial food systems, these details might push them to reconsider the chain altogether. Critics point out that none of this necessarily breaks the law. If the chain's own rules are more stringent than local food safety codes, they can skirt legal repercussions so long as no serious health hazard arises. But many question whether a barely within regulations approach is good enough, or if consumers deserve higher standards from a corporation that positions itself as family-friendly and child-focused. Some also highlight how marketing to children through toys and clown mascots fosters trust in the brand. Unsettling as it may be, the reality behind the grill lines and pressed shapes rarely appears in that marketing story. A handful of employees voice that certain items are not as problematic, like the fresh quarter-pound line or occasional limited run products that truly are made to order. Yet these might be overshadowed by the large volume of offerings that revolve around either processed or refried approaches. While official statements highlight the chain's continued menu improvements, reducing artificial flavors, removing certain trans fats, or upgrading buns, suspicious watchers argue these are superficial changes that don't address the fundamental mass production model. In short, the chain remains a juggernaut, perpetually expanding into new corners of the globe. With that expansion comes the same demand for speed and uniformity that apparently fosters questionable warming times, recooking maneuvers, and leftover reassignments. And so, the question stays: how many regular customers are aware of these behind-the-scenes details? Is ignorance part of the formula, and is it essential for preserving that comforting sense of predictability? Given the massive scale of sales and the unwavering brand recognition, it seems unlikely that these revelations alone will upend the operation. Loyal fans frequently mention that they have eaten these items for years without dire consequences. The chain's defenders argue that the brand invests heavily in quality control, ensuring no major outbreaks of foodborne illness. Indeed, the chain might boast better track records in some metrics than smaller restaurants. But that fact doesn't lessen the bracing effect of hearing that your fish sandwich might have sat for hours or your grilled chicken was tinted with artificial grill lines. Dima Fomenko, 1504-225-17 Lalevos. Meanwhile, brand critics are urging more transparency. They call for consistent labeling that reveals hold times or signals when an item has been refried. They question whether the disclaimers that do exist in tiny text are enough to convey the real nature of each sandwich. Others challenge the brand on the difference in quality between one location and another, as not every store enforces the same guidelines with the same rigor. In the end, the swirl of conversation ensures that neither side is likely to claim a definitive victory. But the behind-the-scenes glimpse remains deeply intriguing to a public that can't look away from the fast food juggernaut. As the chance carries on, signs point to further expansions, new menu experiments, and unstoppable lines of cars wrapping around the drive-thru. The brand can't be easily dethroned, and for many customers, the convenience and nostalgic flavors outweigh concerns about questionable preservation methods or recooked leftovers. Nonetheless, each new revelation chips away at the idealized image that marketing departments work so hard to sculpt. Anyone stepping up to the register now carries the knowledge that the meat might have had quite a journey before being dressed in lettuce, tomato, or sauce. And with that in mind, some find themselves scrolling right past the suspect sandwiches in search of safer territory, or skipping the chain entirely when craving a fulfilling meal. Thus, the swirling controversies about these meaty items, they, the oddly shaped pork, the chicken that's half filler, or the precariously old fish, feed into a broader conversation about how mass-market fast food is prepared. Observers note that similar practices might prevail at other popular chains, but the brand in question, with its iconic global presence, draws special attention. In typical fashion, corporate lines might revolve around phraseology like stringent standards, supplier oversight, and adherence to local regulations. Yet none of that fully dispels the mental image of a neglected tray or a microwaved patty revived from near oblivion. In certain corners of the internet, ex-workers keep sharing stories. The repeated dunking in oil for leftover nuggets, the half-slice, cheese fiasco, the marinade-laden grilled chicken, the double-batch phenomenon for burger patties. They talk about the daily routine of scanning timestamps. Some managers abide strictly, others bend or break the rules. It might be easy for consumers to call these accounts anecdotal, but the consistent repetition of themes across multiple regions suggests a deeper uniformity. Indeed, the cost-driven model is arguably the common thread that fosters identical outcomes. To the disconcerted patron, it can feel like these revelations challenge the trust they placed in a brand that's been part of childhood memories and day-to-day life. A portion of the public shrugs it off, returning for those same burgers or fish sandwiches. Another segment decides they've had enough illusions shattered, pivoting to alternatives they deem more transparent or at least less mass-produced. Ultimately, the brand's unstoppable presence in the global fast food scene means it's likely to endure. Controversies notwithstanding, at this juncture, it's clear that the menu items, once believed to be straightforward, like a grilled chicken or a fillet of fish, harbor complexities that may surprise even the chain's devoted fans. The comedic references to meat glue or fish older than your average library book might elicit laughs or grimaces, but they highlight a more substantial reality. Corporate structures honed to deliver enormous volumes at minimal cost, all while maintaining nominal consistency for billions of customers. Mass production inevitably spawns these trade-offs, particularly in items that do not command the same turnover as the chain's famous burgers. So, if someone's next question is, which meaty menu item is the safest bet? The best answer might be to look for anything labeled as fresh cooked or high turnover, like the quarter-pound line at certain times of day. Observers also advise paying attention to local staff's approach. If you notice them rummaging through warming trays or refrying items, that might be your cue to switch to something else or ask politely for a fresh portion. Though employees, note that a truly made-to-order sandwich might be a tall request in the midst of a hectic lunch rush. The chain, for its part, seldom acknowledges these behind-the-scenes details beyond broad statements about food safety and uniform standards. In the unstoppable churn of the modern fast food marketplace, many consumers remain primarily price-driven or convenience-driven. For them, these meaty revelations will likely remain footnotes in a busy schedule. But for those with a deeper curiosity about what's in their food, each new behind-the-scenes disclosure throws open the door to a bigger question. In the rush to keep a global empire afloat, how many corners get cut in the daily quest to sling out billions of burgers, chicken patties, and fish fillets? All told, the overshadowing theme is that the path these items take from freezer to grill to warming tray, and sometimes back again, doesn't always match the squeaky clean narrative of fresh, made-for-you cooking. Whether it's the special edition barbecue item returning each time pork prices dip, or the fish sandwich quietly waiting for hours, or the grilled chicken sporting suspicious lines, each scenario underscores a shared truth. Mass convenience often triumphs over gastronomic authenticity. Fans might still love the comforting familiarity of the brand's salty fries and sweet beverages, letting the illusions remain. Others might adjust their orders, skipping the lesser circulating items or asking employees about hold times. Meanwhile, employees themselves, from rookies to old hands, navigate instructions that frequently clash with the official manuals. The chain's leadership likely balances these day-to-day decisions with the bigger corporate agenda, culminating in consistent revenue, but also fueling the churn of concerns from inquisitive eaters. And so the brand's arches continue to loom large on cityscapes and highways, beckoning hungry souls with the promise of a reliable meal at a budget-friendly price. Yet the air of secrecy that once enabled these quiet fixes may be thinning as the internet broadcasts insider accounts and consumer vigilance grows. For prospective diners, knowledge might spark caution. For the chain, it might require shifts to recapture trust. In the swirling realm of modern fast food, this tug-of-war has no tidy resolution, only the persistent tension between industrial efficiency and the longing for real fresh meat.